Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you very, very much for being here with us this morning. It is a Friday before a long weekend, so you would have been excused to do something else, but there you are, filling this room. We, for one, are very pleased to have you among us. Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, Ministers, State Secretary, we are all very, very pleased to welcome you here. Minister Papadopoulou, I cannot welcome you in your own home, but I would still like to particularly thank you for your presence here and for inviting us in these premises. We have worked very, very closely with our Slovenian colleagues to bring together this discussion today. The idea behind it was that we need to start talking even more closely than before with our counterparts and our friends and colleagues and allies in the Western Balkans. As the EU enlargement has really started moving again, we do have a target date of 2030, which might not be accomplished, but still it's a target. And we need to proceed, if you like, with the important elements of that discussion. The reason being that we need to convert this dream into a reality. There are, I think, two elements in that discussion. The first of those elements is really the fact that there is a discussion between the European Commission as such and the Western Balkan states. And that is a negotiation that is ongoing on different bits and pieces. It has moved on with different times and levels and speed occasionally, but it has been going on for a very long time, but still it has restarted. And then there is a second discussion, and that second discussion takes place within each particular state, because it does require a major reshuffling of the domestic arrangements in each one of the countries that would like to join the big European family in the form of the European Union. And both discussions are valid. Both discussions need to go hand in hand. We have to understand what are the priorities for each state. We need to figure out how we can be of assistance for these particular priorities. We need to align these particular actions, and we need to make sure that this alignment falls in place with a general European discussion. Especially now that we are looking at a European Union that aims to expand, a European Union that faces new challenges, defense being one of those, with new elements that have to do with security and its geopolitical position in the world. This is not the first step of that discussion. Some months earlier, ELIAMEP had already invited all of you in Athens again, just to talk about the European aspect. This is the second step, and it is the internal aspect, if you like. We're going to proceed with further debate along those lines, and we would certainly be able to go further with each one of you, but all of you collectively. I would like to thank particularly Professor Ransa Makolas, who is the head of the Southeast European Program at ELIAMEP, who has worked tirelessly and in difficult circumstances for this effort. And I would absolutely have to thank also Peter Gertz, the Secretary General of the Bled Strategic Forum, that has been our partner in this. The Ambassador of Slovenia has done quite a lot in bringing us together, and I would like to thank her as well. I would like to stop here and invite Peter to just say a few words. This is, as I said, a pincer movement. We move from the south, the Slovenians move from the north, and we would like to see that action of coming together becoming fruitful and end up with a proper result that would be tangible and beneficial to all of us. Peter, the floor is yours. Thank you so very much for being here with us today.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Maria, for the introduction. You know, when the Greeks and Slovenians forge a partnership and do a panel on enlargement, then you know that things are getting serious. It's the first time that we are working together, but definitely it's not the last. I think the partnership and the whole process of putting together this kind of panel was amazing, and I'm looking forward to our new endeavors. In this context, I would like to thank especially, as I said, ELIAMEP, Maria, Ioannis, Marina. I would like to thank Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Greece for hosting us here, our embassy, who did an amazing job, and of course, big thanks to you who showed up in such numbers to listen to this panel. Now let me say one thing. Enlargement in 2030, I think it's not a matter of choice, but a strategic necessity. Why? Look, we are living in times of big transformation. Old order is dying. The new one is not born yet. And in these times, you know, as Gramsci put it once, the monsters come. You can see with this new geostrategic reality in Europe, but also in other regions, we are facing so many challenges that at least some of the things we have to make right in order to bring back some sort of regional but also global stability. European neighborhood is burning. We have a war in Ukraine. We have a war in Middle East. And if there is one thing that European Union did right in the past, was enlargement. I think, and you can argue with me, but I think that enlargement is the biggest and most important foreign policy tool for European Union in order to bring and enhance the area of stability and prosperity. Where are we now? As I said at the beginning, things are getting serious. I think for the first time, at least since I'm following the Western Balkans and enlargement, meaning whole of my life, I was actually in Thessaloniki in 2003. Yes, I look good, yes, for my age. I'm 32 and counting. And for the first time, I see in European Union a strategic decision. In the past, you know, this famous notion that we are pretending to enlarge and the Western Balkan countries are pretending to reform, it was true. We can say now, after 20 years, and after Thessaloniki, that it was true. But I can see the change because of the new geostrategic reality in Europe. I can see the change that now also countries who have been reserved regarding the enlargement, and we all know which countries, Now, when we are talking inside of the EU, there is no more reservations. There is a unified voice of saying, we want you. We want countries of the Western Balkans to become members of the EU. But of course, like in everything, it takes two to tango. It takes two to tango. I think the strategic decision is here. Now, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the Western Balkan countries. You are going to hear them today. I think that their path is open, and it's my sincere wish and hope that they are going to take it. Always said that I'm going to deal with the Western Balkans until at least one country becomes member. So don't let me get very, very old. I wish you a nice panel. Thank you again, Maria. Ioannis, you take from here. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter, Maria. My name is Ioannis Armakolas. I'm the Senior Research Fellow and Head of the Southeast Europe Program at ELIAMEP. And I'm honored to be in this room today with you and having a stellar panel to discuss one of the most critical policies of the European Union, hopefully, at the moment and also in the future, and to see also both the internal EU dimensions with the help of the two EU member states represented here today, but also the perspective of the Western Balkan countries. And let me quickly introduce you our panel for today. I will start from my left is Ms. Maida Gorcevic, Minister of European Affairs of Montenegro, Mr. Miroslav Gacevic, Assistant Minister of European Integration of Serbia, Ambassador, well known to everybody, Ambassador Alexandra Papadopoulou, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Greece, Mr. Marcos Touchin, State Secretary for European Affairs, Economic Diplomacy, International Law and Protection of Interests, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of Foreign and European Affairs of Slovenia. Then to his left, Ms. Artemis Malo, Deputy Minister for Europe and European Affairs of Albania, Mr. Besnik Bislimi, First Deputy Prime Minister, for European Integration, Development and Dialogue of Kosovo, and to the far left, my colleague, Mr. Srdjan Majstorovic, Chairman of the Governing Board of the European Policy Center in Belgrade. I will not bore you with more introductions about European integration. I think both Maria and Peter have framed the discussion in an excellent manner. And let me start with our host for today, Ambassador Papadopoulou, the first question. I will ask all the speakers to speak for not more than 4 to 5 minutes per question so that we have 2 rounds of questions and then enough time for a discussion with the audience. Ambassador Papadopoulou, it's been 2 decades since both the Thessaloniki summit. We all know how important it has been for Central and Eastern Europe and, of course, for European integration and enlargement policy, and, of course, the Big Bang enlargement of 2004. In the meantime, enlargement policy has entered into a phase of limbo, so to say, but more recently, hopefully, for real, is back on the agenda. I wanted to ask you, how does the Greek diplomacy see the state of play in enlargement policy these days? And actually, do you think from your experience that this so-called new momentum is really genuine in all the member states and overall in all the EU?
First of all, let me thank ELIAMEP and the Bled Strategic Forum for organizing this discussion, and of course thank my friend and colleague Marcos Touchin for being here. We had a very, very good discussion about a lot of issues, and of course Western Balkans was at the heart of this discussion. Greece and Slovenia see eye to eye with regard to enlargement, and we join forces in helping our immediate neighborhood to achieve the goal of becoming members of the European Union, full-fledged members of the European Union, as soon as this is feasible. It's a little of an irony, a twist of history, the fact that the urgent geopolitical need to expand to the east brought a new momentum to the expansion to the south. It's been over 20 years since the enlargement process started for the Western Balkans with the declaration of Thessaloniki, and in these 20 years it didn't move as fast as we all expected and wished for reasons that have to do with the future members, but also with the member states of the European Union. We have our equal and fair share of blame for that, and this is a discussion that can last for a long, long time. But what happened, and here we are today. Greece has been always at the forefront of enlargement in the Western Balkans, and of course we very much support enlargement towards the east. But we made it very clear and loud that the need to give Ukraine and Moldova and eventually Georgia a future in the European Union should not take place at the expense of the Western Balkans. Because apart from the real wish of the people in either region to become part of the European Union and the manifested political will of their respective governments, there is another very important shared reason. Geopolitical concerns are equally valid to the east and to the south, and we cannot move the one at the expense of the other. This having been said, and I think pretty much this is also shared by the other member states, but for us is a red line. Both have to move side by side, each one being judged on its own merits, and each one, enlargement it's a step-by-step approach. It cannot be one size fits all, but there are certain criteria that apply to all, and everybody has to respect this process and abide by it. When it comes to the Western Balkans, more specifically, because this is the topic of today's discussion, I think we should, at the stage where we are now, we have to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. We have to be very careful that the people of the Western Balkans are not disappointed, and also we have to make sure that they understand that there is not enlargement fatigue in the members of the European Union. It's also some misbelief, some doubts whether they're really ready to adapt to the new rules of the game. And on our part, the members of the European Union, we have to stick to our promises. We should not promise things that we don't deliver, and we should never leave false hopes that things will be overcome or overlooked when nobody has the intention to overlook them. So with a very sincere discussion and very open channels of dialogue with each and every candidate and giving to everybody its fair share of credit and blame and equal share of hope, I think it's about time. It's a new momentum, and we all have to take advantage of this momentum before, because if we fail, the repercussions are going to be very, very dire. Thank you.
Ambassador Papadopoulou, may I ask a follow-up question to drill deeper into the question of reforms? And you have had in your long diplomatic career some very interesting and very important posts in the Western Balkans. What is your view of the state of reforms, and in fact even more than the state of reforms, that whether the reforms are genuine or they may become genuine in order for the Western Balkans to join the European Union? Because you have already mentioned that there is some doubt, and understandably so, in some EU member states that actually the region is actually only superficially reforming. What is your view on the basis of your experience from the region?
I will be a little iconoclastic in my answer because I was head of EULEX for 3 years. So I have first-hand experience about reform in the rule of law, but reforms are reforms. Sometimes we demand candidates to partners to go for reforms that even our countries took 20 to 30 years to reach this level of maturity. We want them to go to postgraduate studies without having finished the secondary school. All of the countries of the Western Balkans came out of conflict and difficult situations in the 90s. This is a process. Sometimes we impose on them reforms that take time to be digested. Maybe it's wise to start from more basic things and give them time and space to adapt and then move forward. We cannot drag them in one night and one day. And then also we have to take into consideration the particularity of every case. Not every case is the same. Not every place has the same historical background, political background, political experience, historical experience. There is nothing wrong to adapt the criteria. The criteria are the same. They're not going to change. But we have to adapt them to the circumstances on the ground. And also allow those who aspire to become members to have their own input in how this is going to become a reality as fast and as efficient as possible. My experience in Kosovo, and here we have a representative of Kosovo, it was that, when it comes to fighting corruption, the laws that Kosovo adopted were more advanced than Germany. But the implementation was very difficult because the judges were not up to the standards. So it was only natural they were not implemented properly. So we have to have some flexibility, not in putting the criteria in place, not in judging based on the performance, but in how these criteria are going to be implemented case by case. I think this is very important.
Thank you, Ambassador. Mr. Stucin, at the Bled Strategic Forum, Charles Michel surprised everybody, including the Commission, I think, when he mentioned that the EU should be ready to accept new member states by 2030. We could even call this a Bled pledge. And us working on the Western Balkans, we very much welcome this statement by the President of the European Council, but not everybody was very happy with it. What's your opinion on this goal of 2030? Is this realistic objective for the region? Is the EU ready for such an ambitious aim? And is the region also ready and willing to take up the task?
Thank you very much, and first of all, I would like to thank for the hospitality here in Athens. Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, ELIAMEP and Bled Strategic Forum for organizing this event, all of you for coming, and all of our colleagues from the region also to be here. I think it's a very good title to answer to your question. Why? Because the title is a dream or reality to reach 2030. I think what we are having right now, it's a nightmare. Enlargement process was the most successful process of integrating European countries into the biggest peace process in the world. So European integration is the biggest peace process in the world. It was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize in 2012. And the explanation for award of the Nobel Peace Prize was that the integration managed to secure the stability of Europe, including with the enlargement process. After the EU was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, we managed to kill the enlargement process somehow. And we are actually, so the nightmare goes like this. We are walking in the tunnel, we see a light in front of us, but no matter how fast we are walking or we are running or we are, standing, this light is in the equal distance in front of us, so nothing is happening. As Peter said at the beginning, it's not a question whether we should think serious with it. It's a reality we live in, and we need to wake up from this nightmare and seriously work on this if we want to have this continent secure and safe and stable. So what to do? Definitely both sides need to continue doing what we are doing, but the candidate countries, the aspirants, need to know what they need to do in order to become members one day. So what is happening in the last years is that we put more and more conditions, and they are fulfilling these conditions, but then there are other conditions coming, and at the end of the day, nobody really knows what is to be fulfilled in order to tick the box and to do the next step. And the result is actually what Alexandra mentioned, that in this exercise, everybody starts to bluff at one point because we want to fulfill these conditions, the new conditions and the old conditions. So at the end, we realize that the best way to fulfill this condition is just to pretend that we fulfill this condition. We pretend that they fulfill this condition and try then to move this project on. We need to be deadly serious about it. And to be deadly serious about it, there is only one way. We need to start negotiating with each and every country and then measure this process with all the tools we have on our disposal. European Commission is able to measure this process. I agree, sometimes it is case-by-case basis, it's a lot about the implementation, but we need to start measuring it somehow. So our idea is for all the candidate countries to start negotiating, and then for us to be able to assess if they did their work or not. On the other hand, EU also needs to be deadly serious about it, because if we leave the area of Western Balkans out for too long, and 2030 is maybe even already too long, then we'll end up not only with the conflicts around European Union, but also in European Union. And it's definitely not the time where we can afford this. So we need to step up our game. We need to do the reforms. We need to, and by doing reforms, I don't mean that we have first to reform and then to allow the countries in. The European Union is reforming all the time. Major treaties changes were done in the past in average every 5 to 7 years, so that's nothing spectacular to do a reform. I'm not saying even that we need a treaty change, but we need to reform ourselves in order to be able to get bigger. But don't use this as an excuse. Please don't say we need to improve our capacities in order to absorb 600,000 people from Montenegro. I mean, a couple of years ago, 70 million people left European Union because of Brexit. 70 million, one of the biggest net payer left European Union. Did we need to reform at that time? Not really. So let's, speak in the right perspective when we talk about the reform.
Just a quick follow-up question for a brief answer, if you may. I mean, in this room, and especially in this panel, we are a bit biased. We are all pro-Western Balkans. But when we all visit Brussels these days, I mean, the Brussels bubble, not the people who love the Balkans, they all say, well, Ukraine is pushing the right buttons, they say the right words, they're doing the right things. So it's all about Ukraine and Moldova that goes together with Ukraine. Are you at all concerned that the Western Balkans may be left behind now that the EU as a whole is focusing, when it comes to enlargement, so much on Ukraine and Moldova?
The Western Balkans was not only left behind, it was completely forgotten. So nobody even spoke about Western Balkans except perhaps we, Greece, Austria, maybe Croatia, a couple of countries around Western Balkans, and that was it for the last 10 years. Nobody even mentioned it. So now what we are seeing in Brussels is the effect of 6 months, I call it. So whatever we draft in our ministries, so calling for this and this, then also in about 6 months, other member states start to copy. So that's a good progress, and I think that everybody is aware now, including our colleagues from the other parts of the European Union, that Western Balkans, the European perspective of Western Balkans is a fact, and that we need to work on it. The question is very good. So what will be the balance between so-called trio countries and their integration and Western Balkans. I think it's, at the end of the day, it should be a healthy competition somehow. We also entered 20 years ago in a group of 10 countries at that time, and we saw it as a healthy competition, us comparing with other countries that were also in the same way. So I'm saying that the fact is that in European Union, some member states will be more loud about Western Balkans, some more about these Eastern trio countries. It's nothing wrong about this, but let's have the same measurements for all.
Thank you. Ms. Gorcevic, moving to Montenegro. Montenegro is the front runner when it comes to the accession process, at least among the Western Balkan states. It has started, of the 6 countries, it was the first to start accession negotiations. But at the same time, it has been negotiating for a decade, more than a decade now, probably more than all the previous candidates had negotiated. And it has only provisionally closed 3 chapters out of 35. There is some optimism with the new government that things can move faster. But there is still a lot of doubt and a lot of second thoughts in many European quarters about whether Montenegro can actually deliver the reforms. So can Montenegro actually deliver the reforms?
Thank you for the question. Kalimera, dear hosts, dear friends of enlargement, dear colleagues, it is my greatest honor and pleasure to be here today and speak about can Montenegro deliver or not, because with the new government, with the new energy that we are having, and with the new political stability in Montenegro, finally, I'm certain that I can say very proudly that we will deliver all the results when it comes to Montenegro, because the main goal of this government is European integrations and European path. As you said, we are in this process more than a decade. In June, it will be at 13 years, and I'm certain that Peter will remember this since he's in this process for a long time. There were some ups and downs when it comes to Montenegro. There were some, when it comes dream or reality, we were sleeping last couple of years, and I'm speaking very honest. But now with this new momentum that we are having in Montenegro, with this new political majority which is working very hard on everything when it comes to European integration, when it comes to this political will, not only in Montenegro, but also in Brussels that we are seeing, and also of our friends of the enlargement that we are hearing today. I'm certain that it all is very encouraging for us, and this is the optimism that we are wanting, seeking, and that we are now wishing to come true. That's why we are having very ambitious plan. That's why we are, even the fact that we only provisionally closed 3 chapters, there is a lot of work in front of us. That's why we are working very hard with the new methodology when it comes to the chapters 23 and 24. So when it comes to Montenegro, we are having, we had the biggest test for this government and for this political majority in the first 100 days of this government. And we showed, and we started with the toughest thing when it comes to showing that we are here to change, that we are here to have the reforms inside the Montenegro. And we showed that in the parliament, speaking with the opposition as well, because the European integration is not only the state of the government, it is a thing that is wishing for all the society. And when it comes to European integration, this is, I'm certain, well, maybe the only thing where we all have a consensus in Montenegro. So at this moment, like I said, in first 100 days, we finished a lot of things that when it comes to the judiciary names, that we're waiting for 8 or 9 years. In that way, we showed also to our European partners that we are willing to change in the reform, especially in the rule of law, which are the first task and the first thing through the new methodology when it comes to 23 and 24 chapters. So the other things and other laws that are waiting for the interim benchmarks for the Gattering and EBAR are the easy one because we need only the majority in the parliament. I'm certain that we will have a lot of challenges. I'm certain that there will be a lot of tasks in front of us, but the only thing that we cannot doubt is the will of change, the will of reforms, and the will that we want to be the next member state. Of course, that we are someone that are seeking and wanting the merit-based regatta principle, because even the fact that we are wanting that the whole Western Balkans join the EU, because this is something of necessity, like Peter said in his speech. So at this moment, I'm certain that we will have and we will be the successful story when it comes to Montenegro, and that we will have also the support of our EU partners in this way.
Thank you. Mr. Gacevich, President Vučić, in a recent interview for a Slovenian newspaper, mentioned that the enlargement seems still very far away for Serbia. Do you agree with that assessment? I know it's not very easy to disagree with President Vučić, but if you agree, what can be done in Serbia and elsewhere to actually to break the mold, to bring Serbia closer to membership?
Thank you very much for your question, and dear guests and dear friends, it is my pleasure to be here with you and to share some of my views. Dear Ioannis, thank you very much for this easy question, as you said. But to be honest with you, I have to admit that I haven't seen that article, so it is a bit difficult for me to comment on something which could be, the context could be seen in a different way. But I assume that the President Vučić actually expressed his discontent and dissatisfaction with some things that we already mentioned today. Extremely lengthy process of negotiations, as well as Montenegro. We started our negotiations, formally opened our negotiations for more than 10 years ago, and if you see how, if you ponder our success by closed or open chapters, it could easily give you a false picture of our progress and our advance in this EU path. Needless to mention that the Republic of Serbia was the very first country which started negotiation process under very stringent and strict procedures. Along with the Montenegro, which we all both had this suspension clause or mechanism in terms of progress in rule of law area, where in order to open new chapters, we were constantly being monitored in progress in this area. So before opening any chapter, there had to be some sort of advancement in rule of law area. But a part of Montenegro, we had additional suspension mechanism, which is a dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. So that's a one picture which could give you totally false impression about our advancement. The other thing is how we are performing our reform agenda, and I'm very honored to say that just recently we took initiative and we submit self-assessment of fulfillment of interim benchmarks for chapters 23 and 24 and sent it to Brussels. We are expecting their feedback according to what they told us by the end of May. So I would say that the President Vučić had more that his remark about our enlargement current status was more towards the general picture of the enlargement process. Today we are all facing that something which was in majority technical negotiation process today is a purely political process. And I could agree with many things that Mr. State Secretary Stutzin said, but we from the Western Balkans consider that there's no sincere willingness to enlarge the Western Balkans. So we see that the EU itself needs to pursue this internal reform process. Why am I telling you this? Because, for example, there are so many extremely technical issues. For example, while the opening chapters could be considered as political, I don't want to bother you with so many technical details, but in some chapters we have something which is called OBAR, Opening Benchmark Assessing Report, and it's purely technical issue. For example, we've been blocked by some of the member states for more than, I think, 5 years to open some new chapters because they consider that there's no fulfillment of some political criteria, how to say, although we are talking about purely technical issue, which is the, once you fulfill these OBARs, then the European Commission and EU itself just present their common position, and then the talks about the opening chapter starts. So I wouldn't say that the President Vučić was implying on our sentiment vis-a-vis EU, but on the other hand, on the other way. So especially bearing in mind how we proceed in this reform process, especially in the rule of law area. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Malo, Albania hopes to start accession negotiations very soon. But in some parts of the EU, there's still serious concerns about the state of rule of law in the country. What can you tell us about the rule of law reforms that your government has undertaken, and what are the priorities for the near future?
Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Καλημέρα σε όλους. Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. So first of all, let me express our deepest gratitude for this organization and thank the organizers and especially the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Hellenic Republic for hosting us and having us here so as to give us the opportunity not only to share our experiences of the hard work during the recent years and more than a decade work, but at the same time to ask for assistance and support for all European countries, and especially to express the gratitude to the Western Balkan region and all the countries that were cooperating on such a rigorous and consistent stage now. In order to answer the question that you asked me, it is important, first of all, to take note of where we are in this process today. Albania has undertaken rigorously, consistently very important reforms. I may mention the 7 important reforms that were almost finished, and we have also been consistently cooperating and being under the very rigorous consolation of the European Commission services that the 2 documents now have been approved by the government. The first document is the reform on the rule of law and democracy, and of course public administration. Now the Albanian government has changed the structure within 2 new ministries, the Minister of Public Administration and Anti-Corruption and the Minister of Integration, that is led by the chief negotiator, that are specialized teams and departments that are focused only on these 2 cases especially. On the other hand, we're very proud of our economic reforms, the reforms that were focused on the resolution of our different issues on bilateral level and internal issues as well. But the most important thing is that we're focused on regional cooperation as the main factor to Western Balkans enlargement, which means that this is going to bring higher levels of interconnectivity connectivity and trade and economic levels, cross-border cooperations, things and steps that have not been known and recognized before from all the states. According to the rule of law and democracy that you were asking, there have been huge steps of development, and I may start with the reform of the vetting process with judges and prosecutors and the creation of two special structures that are built and are operating very actively now in the Albanian government. That is the special structure for anti-corruption and organized crime, and the National Bureau of Investigation, which are two structures that are very important, and the government is enhancing to their independence and to their transparency on working with within their actors and factors. On the other hand, there have been undertaken very important initiatives that aim to spur the long-term recovery of the region. Most importantly, the aim to be focused and to work on is an imperative that is clear now. The Western Balkans 6 need to take the necessary steps to move closer to the European Union. There is not European Union integration. It's not an alternative. It's the only alternative. Otherwise, the states of the region, the Balkan states, would not have the chance to take the seat to European Union table and to give the economies and the security of its citizens for their needs of the years to come. So if we are going to stop back to the most important reforms, there are also very important events that have taken place during all these years. But one thing is sure, and I'm very proud to say that the development that Albanian society, Albanian government has proved up to now, according to the tasks that were set to the inner rule and government of Albania, has been very productive and has been even reported and manifested by European Commission reports during all these steps. As you well mentioned, these are some tasks that we cannot expect to be immediately. But it's exactly what Ms. Papadopoulos said, that we cannot pretend to start from bachelor to immediately to PhD. But in fact, Albania has been working and is a very good student on home assignment during all these years. So yes, we pretend to have our degree and our thesis soon. Thank you.
Mr. Bislini, one of the key objectives of your government, the granting of the visa liberalization for Kosovo has been achieved, and your Kosovo has applied for membership in the EU. How do you see the likelihood of actually achieving the same, that getting the status of a candidate, and what are your main arguments in response to those countries that are more reluctant to see Kosovo embarking in that process?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ramapolo. Thank you very much for having me here to discuss this, let's say, top priority for my country. Visa liberalization is finally completed, and we have started to see the benefits of this. Our youth are traveling in large numbers to the EU capital cities. Most of them now have found us a target, Thessaloniki, so every weekend we see thousands of Kosovars visiting the second largest city in Greece. At the same time, we have started our EU journey back in 2016 when we signed the SAA. The SAA was a product of a very healthy compromise found among EU member countries, which put aside individual divergences with respect to the Kosovo's independence and wanted to open the EU path for my country. When you look at the example of EU's reaction to the war in Ukraine, we see several very important elements or lessons learned that could be applied in the case of Kosovo. we see that the response of the EU was twofold. They started to put geostrategical importance on the forefront, as Ambassador Papadopoulou also mentioned, the relevance of security and others, and they started to look at the problem far broader than isolated. So in the response of EU, you see also security elements, Finland and Sweden joining NATO, but in the same time opening perspective for not only Ukraine, but also Moldova and Georgia. So the approach was comprehensive, and in my opinion, it was a mix of action and reaction. But in the same time, as Ambassador Papadopoulou pointed out, it is very important not to abandon the merit-based approach. So we still want the merit-based approach to be the guiding principle, and we do not want this shift of policies to be done at the expense of the Western Balkan 6. If you stick to the merit-based approach, then for my country, it is important that we do part of our assignments. We do part of our assignment and insist on a standardized, unbiased evaluation of the progress. When we talked about the enlargement fatigue, so Mr. Stuchin said there was a period where EU pretty much refused to deal with the problems in the Western Balkans. There were only a few countries, mostly from the region, that were still interested in the topic. But in the broader context, this enlargement fatigue had also impact on the speed of our reforms, because something that was seen as fatigue on the EU side, in the Western Balkans, it put the question that is the opposite of what you put. So on the EU, we would say, can the Western Balkan countries deliver? But then during this fatigue, Balkan countries said, but can EU deliver? So, because the enlargement for us is not a promise. It's a win-win outcome of a process where also EU has its own interests. It's not an enlargement to the east, because when you look at it from the perspective of Greece, it's enlargement to the north. When you look at it from Bulgaria, it's enlargement to the west. For Slovenia, it's enlargement to the east. But for Hungary, it's enlargement south. And this is true because we are inside EU. That's why it's good to start seeing also EU as a very important beneficiary of the enlargement process. So what we have done in my country is to analyze what are the sectors where we have to make sure that we send the correct signals to the EU. And the signal is that we are ready to embark on this process. And we are ready because we can prove that historically we can have the fastest progress compared to the previous governments, and horizontally also we make the fastest convergence. So if you look at the country reports, whether the country report for Kosovo is better than the previous reports, and whether it shows more advancement compared to the country reports in the region, because this will be the right signal to send to the EU. When you started incorporating in the discussion representatives from the Western Balkan 6, and you started with Montenegro, the first statement was no, you as a front runner. So for us it's very important to understand the mechanism by which we measure the positioning. Which of us is the front runner? For example, if you have 35 chapters to reach the target and become a member of the EU, who will be the front runner? If one country has already closed 17 of these chapters, but in 10 years involvement, but another country has closed 10 in only 4 years of the enlargement, which of them is a front runner? Because speed matters. Not only positioning, but also speed. That's why the commitment of the country and the domestic and international support are of crucial importance. Now for this measurement, there are 4 ways of measuring the progress. One of them will be to rely on domestic reports. So this is not necessarily a good instrument because domestic reports are prone to subjectivism. That's why we have to see how we combine this with additional. The second will be relying on the EU's country report. But this also has its flaws. The EU country report has a big flaw, is the lack of standardization. So it heavily depends on the perspectives and beliefs of the persons or group of people that are involved in drafting that report. For example, it's very easy to see that a country that has managed 7 reforms, let's say Kosovo in the public administration reform, it still gets the result limited progress. Another country, let's say my friend from Albania, with 2 reforms, get the evaluation good progress. So this lack of standardization makes it more difficult than to compare the relative performance. The third instrument will be the perceptions of all of us, but these perceptions have also a problem incorporated because perceptions are built on the first 2 inputs. And because the first 2 inputs are not perfect tools, so then also the perception cannot be perfect. Let me give you just a short example. During the World Championship in soccer, North Korea decided to only air games 1 or 2 days after they were played. And for example, for Japan, South Korea, or US, they only aired those games that these teams lost. And for North Korea, only the games that they won. So it means this becomes then not a perception based on facts, but a perception as an input to change the facts. That's why for us it was very important to make sure that the 4th instrument is the crucial, and these are international rankings. How do think tanks, international organizations judge the progress? So how do they judge the progress on economic, macroeconomic indicators, on social indicators? How do they judge our progress on the rule of law, anti-corruption, and so on? And we believe that using these indexes, Kosovo will be very easily maybe capable of joining the EU, if not at the same pace, maybe, if not faster, but at least at the same pace as our other neighbors in the Western Balkans. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For my colleague Serjan Majstorovic, who has been an observer of EU integration in the Balkans for many years, I mean, can you summarize for us, Serjan, in your view, what is the main obstacles, what is the main problem inhibiting or preventing serious, genuine reform in the region? And also, second part of the question, has it been the lack of serious reforms that had kept the region in limbo for so long, or something else?
Yes. That would be a very succinct answer to your question. But I guess you didn't invite me just to be funny. First of all, thank you very much, Professor Gavanelli and Mr. Grk, whose surname, when translated in English, is the Greek. So it's very appropriate for you, Peter, to be here and to be a co-host of this event. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to be a part of this distinguished panel. But joke aside, yes, Yanis, you're completely right. We are very usually faced with the questions coming from either politicians or even journalists who are becoming susceptible to this ruling narrative, you know, that when things are not moving forward, they're pointing towards Brussels and they're saying, okay, they don't want us. And unfortunately, this is the victory of those who are not expressing their political willingness to engage and to invest their political capital into a very sometimes difficult and demanding process of reforms back home. We need to be very clear. There are no negotiations with the EU. There is EU acquis, there are standards that needs to be accepted by all of us sitting around this table. So there are no negotiations. You can negotiate bits and pieces on some financial aspects, on transitional periods, but these are minor issues. The fact is that if you have a clear political commitment to become an EU member state, you need to adopt the whole body of the EU acquis. You need to organize your institutions, and you need to start implementing the rules and procedures which are being applied in pretty much the whole European continent. And in that sense, the EU integration process is the fight for the equality of the Western Balkan citizens
with the EU citizens themselves. Why should be discriminated against because our judges are crooked, corrupted, because our procedures are corrupted? This is why we need this kind of a push and pull process or sandwich strategy of the EU integration process, where citizens are demanding more reforms from their government, and from the other side, the EU member states are really honestly promoting the enlargement of the process. Now, we heard from distinguished members of this panel that there are some question marks with regards enlargement versus deepening. I'm sorry to say, but if we are blind not to see that these two processes are just the sides of the same coin, our future does not look very bright. Europe is confronted with the most serious security challenge ever since the Second World War, World War II. And if we are not understanding, reading the context that the whole Europe is at war, I'm very concerned about our mutual future. Just ask our colleagues from Moldova. Are they sleeping, peacefully when the war is on their borders? These are the future member states. Ukraine, not to mention. And by the way, this year is the 10th anniversary of Russian aggression on Ukraine. It happened 10 years ago. It didn't happen just 2 years ago. So we lost a lot of time, and time is a resource in international relations, and we wasted it, quite comfortably, I would say. So three major points that I would like to raise. Enlargement and deepening needs to go hand in hand, and it will happen only if there are three major ingredients. One, if there is an interest, but interest which is genuine. And I think Mr. Stutin was very right in pointing out the honesty in his speech. Are we really genuine that we are going to change our societies, that our political elites are going to fight the corruption, that they are going to put themselves in front of the judiciary, which is not under political influence? This is one of the key questions for our politicians. Are we genuine enough to reform ourselves? I'm afraid that we've failed so far, because I'm coming from Serbia, a country that is 10 years engaged in the EU accession talks, does not look as a country that is to be a future member state in a couple of years. And that's the fact. Just read the European Commission reports, read the international indexes, and you will see that at this moment there is a lack of trust that Serbia is committed to the EU integration process in such a speed. The second point, is there a capacity, institutional capacity, financial capacity to change the Europe, to adjust it, and to change ourselves in the process? So on the question of capacities, I'm quite sure, Jan, that we are going to talk about the growth plan and the opportunities that growth plan provides in this area for the Western Balkan countries. And the third element is commitment. If you are not committed, you can have an interest, you can have capacities, but if you're not committed to implement what is required, we are going to fail. There are suggestions how to move ahead. To just mention a couple of them. One is the Franco-German group of think tank organizations who set the playing field of how to move things forward. And just to remind you, one of the recommendations concerning the enlargement in this paper was a mutual commitment by EU and the candidates for preparing 2030 enlargement. But read it carefully, mutual commitment. It echoes something that I wrote a couple of years ago in a small op-ed when I advocated for a new plan for common future in Europe. We need a plan for a common future. When the Western Balkan countries, when the Eastern European countries like Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine are part of the common Europe, war will end in Ukraine, hopefully by the win of Ukrainian forces. But we need to prepare for the day after that happened, that Russia is not going to disappear. The threat of Russia is not going to disappear. Just ask your Baltic neighbors, just ask your Polish colleagues, Moldovan colleagues, those who are at the realm of Europe. For that, we need a common plan, how to prepare, strategically prepare for the common future, because as I think Ambassador Papadopoulou said, when you take a look at the geographical map, this what we call the Western Balkans is geographically already within the EU. We just need to regulate it, and for that we need genuine interest, genuine capacities, and genuine commitment. Yanis, I will stop here, and I'm ready for your...
Thank you. We have time for a quick second round, so I would urge our speakers to give briefer answers so that we have some discussion also with the audience. A common question for Ambassador Papadopoulou and Mr. Stucin. It was mentioned already by Sergeant Majstorovic. There's a heated debate in the EU and certain capitals about what needs to be done from the EU in order to be ready, for the Union to be ready to accept new member states. And Sergeant mentioned the so-called Franco-German group of experts that produced a report. What is the stance of your governments, of our Greek government and the Slovenian government? Institutional reforms of the EU before enlargement, or institutional reforms and enlargement, or in parallel with enlargement? Ambassador Papadopoulou.
Thank you. I would like to just make a comment with regard to what the last speaker spoke. The question is not whether we want to have a common future. We're having a common future. Whether we like it, we don't like it, we have a common future. The problem is how to build it in a way that it's not oblivious to what's happening around us. The world around us is changing. It's changing very fast. And we have challenges from both the East and the South. There is a war raging in Ukraine, a Russian invasion, but also we have a war in the Middle East. We have instability in the Caucasus. Definitely there is instability in the Balkans, and so other areas in the world, they go through phases of change and instability. The Horn of Africa, the South China Sea. So the world around us is changing, and our future is common, so it's how we fortify this future for ourselves and the next generations. In my view, there is a commitment to the European integration on both sides, the candidates and the EU members. I don't have any doubt in my mind about that, because if you look at the map, we're stuck together. So definitely we're committed to live together because we have no other option where to go. We're going to be here next to each other, and we're all facing these challenges. So there is an interest. There is a genuine interest. There is a commitment. I don't doubt this. Also, in response to your question, yes, there is a commitment on the part of the European Union, but also we have our challenges within the European Union. The beauty about the European Union is that it adapts itself. It has proven over the years that it exists that it has this capacity to adapt. That's why it survives, because it can adapt to it's a work in the making. It's not something very static and written in stone. It adapts, and depending on the circumstances, it finds a way to survive and thrive. And we are in this kind of a crossroads that we have to adapt and change, even within the European Union. But the two processes are parallel. They don't have, enlargement should not depend on how we adapt and how fast we adapt. And on the other hand, our adaptation is not only limited to enlargement, should not be limited to enlargement only. So these are two distinct processes that they have to go forward, both of them. Nobody undermines the importance of each one of them, but it's a different kind of adaptation if the European Union has to welcome the 600,000 inhabitants of Montenegro, and another thing to welcome the 70 70 million citizens of Ukraine. These are two different stories. And as we said, and I think everybody agrees, enlargement is on its own merits. So it's not going to be a big bang. It's going to be each country on its own merits. So yes, we have to adapt our rules, the way we do things, but these are two different processes that at some point, yes, they cross each other, but they don't depend on each other and they're not mutually exclusive. In my, also another point, yes, all the candidate countries have to accept the acquis. There is no question. The problem is that the acquis changes and multiplies and becomes more and more and deeper and deeper. And the longer the enlargement process takes, the more it's like moving the goalpost. And that creates problems to the candidates. So we have, it's very easy for all of us in the European Union to say, okay, this is it, take it or leave it. This is not right. All of them are going to take it. They know it. But the way we make this taking easier on them, easier to digest, because this is not only a matter of government, it's a matter of people. And the perception sometimes in the people in the Western Balkans is, yes, we want, but we're not wanted. So it's also a homework that all of us have to do in order for this acquis to be implemented and accepted and become part of everyday life, not just a tick-the-box case. Because in a lot of times, exactly because the candidates have no saying on anything, no negotiation, saying in how to do it, in how you take your pill. You can take your pill with water, you can take it with orange juice. I mean, so because they have no saying, that's why they resign. They tick the box, they pretend to reform, we pretend that they reform, and we move on, and nothing in reality happens. So I would say this is a relationship that has to grow. We have to trust each other. It's, of course, verify, trust but verify. Of course, they will have to adapt, and there's no question about that. They know it. That's why they want to become part too. But give them the space and to breathe while adapting, to grow in their own space. Each one has its own particularities. We're not carbon countries, so this process becomes inclusive and part of their DNA. I remember when Greece joined the European, at that time, European communities, what country we were when we joined and how we are today. This transformation power of becoming a member of the European communities and European Union now is huge. No government can stop it. No government, whether they like it or they don't like it, as long as we give the people the power and the hope. And it's very important that they have the hope.
Institutional reforms?
Yes.
Or enlargement?
About institutional reforms, I don't like when we are talking about institutional reforms as a project ahead of us, a big project we have to do before something else happens. Somebody said that the crisis mode is the main pillar of European identity. So basically European integration was formed after the biggest crisis that happened in this world, so the Second World War. And then since then, European Union is always adopting to the situations around the world. Just in the last 15 years, there were a couple of major crises. I don't even remember all of them, but it started with the financial crisis 15 years ago. Then it was COVID, terrorism, now security crisis around Europe. We didn't do any major treaty reform in this time, but somehow we are coming across all of this crisis stronger at the end of the day. I agree we need to speak a little bit more systematically about how to make the EU even stronger, because if we are looking at the world around us, what we are observing is the world that is not, unfortunately, not going to be more friendly and more peaceful and more stable, but I'm afraid we are facing the situation where the instability will grow. So we definitely need to reform, and we definitely need to speak about and not only speak, but work on the reform consistently. But this is something European Union always does. So it's not a project for itself. And that's why I'm very afraid that this can only be used as an excuse for not to enlarge. So that we are talking about reform and then about enlargement, which I think would be a strategic mistake. Now, concretely, next year we will start negotiations basically about the new multi-annual financial framework for the European Union. And when we are talking about money, this is always, good opportunity to talk about for what the money will be spent in the next period. And I think we need to focus on the issues where we are not strong enough to overcome the future crisis. And I think we can all see what those issues are. We definitely need to be stronger when it comes to the foreign policy. European Union needs to speak with one voice, especially in the major crises that are happening around us. We definitely need to be more competitive when it comes to the big players around the globe. China, US, Brazil, India, you name it. European Union can only be successful if it acts together and if it reforms in this way that we'll be able to compete. We'll definitely have to be, we'll need to be safer in the future, so we need to speak about how to, defend ourselves, how to make us stronger. So there are many areas, but just don't take all these reforms in a package and say, look, we have to do this and then we will enlarge. We just simply need to be doing what we are doing for the last decades.
Thank you. Ms. Gorchevich, the Reform and Growth Plan. Are you satisfied with the criteria set and the overall plan of the EU in that matter? And is Montenegro ready to actually access those funds?
Well, I believe that the new growth plan is a great instrument for not only for the Montenegro but also for the other countries, and this is also an instrument which will have for us additional valuable financial support, and more importantly, it will open EU internal market for the Western Balkan countries as well. When it comes to Montenegro, we are already sent the second draft of the reform agenda. So far, we don't see it as a challenging for Montenegro to achieve these these reforms that are asked from us, even the fact that there are a lot of tasks that are going to be asked for Montenegro, and it means that we have to work very, very hard on the reform agenda. But from the political side, there is a will, and there is also maybe a lack of capacities when it comes to the human resources in implementing all the stuff that are asked from us. But so far, when it comes to meeting the criteria for Montenegro, it will not represent a huge challenges, and we are already eager to implement all necessary reforms when it comes to Montenegro. For example, in this reform agenda, there is more than 60 reforms that are awaited for us. These are green and digital agenda, business development, human resources, but also the rule of law. So far, with the communication with the European Commission, we are seeing this as a great instrument and a great possibility for Montenegro, and we are not seeing this as a substitute to the enlargement process, but just as an additional tool to reach this final goal for Montenegro, which is to the end membership to the EU.
Thank you. Mr. Gacevich, I will focus on foreign policy. Serbia is if I'm not mistaken, the country in the Western Balkans that is least aligned with the EU when it comes to foreign security policy. And since the war in Ukraine started, this has become a major issue for all EU member states. In fact, some Eastern European states that feel threatened by Russia more than the rest, they would even consider foreign policy or geopolitics to be the most important thing above even actual reforms within the country. So is Serbia's seen by many as a geopolitical ambivalence the main obstacle for Serbia joining the EU? What's the view from Belgrade?
Before touch upon the issue of sanctions, I would just like to briefly mention that our president had several meetings in the past period, in the past year, with President Zelensky. The last one in Tirana, quite fruitful and quite frank. When it comes to war in Ukraine, Serbia is everything but neutral. We could condemn the war. We condemned all these referendum that took place in the region. Actually, it is in our own interest to inherit or to nurture the international law, because we were the subject of breaking the international law. So, on the other hand, when we talk about sanctions and the situation vis-a-vis Ukraine and, CFSP, it's worth mentioning that alignment and percentage is not the only part of the CFSP. I would just like to briefly mention that the Republic of Serbia participates in all EU-led military missions. We have groups in two battle groups. We are participating in two battle groups. And it is not secret that we did not impose sanctions against Russia. But on the other hand, we are doing everything, and we've been commended on several occasions by the EU Special Envoy for the Sanctions, Mr. David O'Sullivan, for preventing all possibility of circumvention of the sanctions. Additionally, if you look at the economical digits, you will see that there is no any increase in trade between Serbia and Russia. And I'm not sure that all EU member states could claim the same. Regarding sanctions, it's for Serbia, that's a very complex issue. So it's not like in many European countries, one-dimensional issue, which means, that they are suffering economically due to dependence for Russian oil or gas. Of course that we have that component as well, but there are two additional components, I would like to say. So the second component would be that political component. We are all aware of the position of Russia vis-a-vis our dispute with Pristina, and about respecting our red lines, meaning joining Kosovo to the UN or the UN agencies. So we have to be aware of their position and of their support. And then there is a third segment of why it is extremely difficult for Serbia to impose sanctions, and I would say that it's a social or emotional segment of that, meaning that we were the subject of heavily imposed sanctions for more than 10 years. And I could give you the first-hand experience that the sanctions most of the time don't justify their intentions. So sanctions most of the time affect ordinary citizens. Political cronies, political elites would always find a way to bypass any sort of sanctions. So We do know very well how it is being under the sanctions, and we are kind of quite reluctant when it comes to punishing ordinary citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Mallow, do you see Albania becoming a member of the EU by 2030? Is this a realistic goal for your country, and what would you see the main obstacle in your country for that goal to be achieved?
In fact, in this question, for sure, I have to repeat myself again that we're very proud of our assignment. We're very proud of what we have achieved. But on the other hand, there are still more to be done, of course, and we haven't finished for sure. But I strongly believe that this is a process that is always ongoing. It's not a process that has a date of realization and this is a stop. We're always on improvement, we're always on investing, we're always on reforms, and I think that this is not only for Albania or Western Balkans, but even for European states as well. So on the other hand, I think that speaking of the Bled Pledge and 2030, the Albanian government, Prime Minister Edi Rama, has made it clear that if we set a date, we're somehow missing the point. What matters is the quality, and what matters is the strong effort to reach the conditions. But I have to say that the European Union must address the problem. What the European Union integration process of the Western Balkans is facing for 21 years, such as slow decision-making progress, the labyrinth of conditionalities, coupling countries and issues that in fact are not related to accession and cannot be justified by merit-based approach. That means that this is somehow a cooperation, is not just putting the target only on one state and just waiting for the outcomes of one state. This is a commitment to a credible and predictable process where merit matters, for sure. Thank you.
Mr. Bislimi, the same question for you. Do you see your country a member of the European Union by 2030?
It's a question that is impossible to answer because, as Ambassador Papadopoulos said, it's a moving target. So the problem is that we have set a date based on the current capacities and expectations and the situation in the EU, but by ignoring the fact that the target is a moving target in terms of conditions to be achieved. As Mr. Majstorovic pointed out, there is little negotiation with you. There are keys that you have to fulfill, but these keys are moving and are changing, sometimes faster than the capacities of our countries are changing to absorb this potential. What matters for us is to ensure that this window called 2030 is not only a willingness, but also is followed by the ability of both sides. So for me, it's important to know that once we have this willingness, and then at the same time we develop the timetable, which is a very complex one, because in this timetable, you have several variables. You have the number of countries, the number of targets, the number of specificities and activities to be able to reach each of this target. And, of course, you need to standardize the evaluation. What is important for me is to make sure that this is a target for the Western Balkans, because only then, when we have the target for all of us, only then when we have this timetable matrix, we will be able to sit again in 2013 and judge this target and conclude whether it was a successful policy or not. If we say, well, our target was a successful policy because one of the front runners joined, then I would say this has become or has been a rigged game from the very beginning. Because if we conclude that the target has been achieved if one country joins the EU, then we can strategically pick up one country, help them, and then say, okay, we were successful. You see the rest, you were not able to meet the criteria, so it was your fault. Because when the target is not met, it's very, very good to sit and discuss whose failure is that. Did the Western Balkans fail or not meeting the targets? Did the EU fail? Or was it a rigged game from the beginning? Or maybe we failed all together because the target was too optimistic from the very beginning. Another important element is that sometimes on your progress towards EU, you face some barriers over which you have little control. For example, you asked Minister Malo about the obstacles that Albania has. Albania has an advantage that most of these obstacles are domestic, so they can address them. But in the case of Kosovo, the key obstacle is outside Kosovo. Sitting in 5 capitals, none of them being able to be influenced by my country. And then the question is, how do you navigate in a race where you want to have the same target, but you face additional barriers? Imagine this as a race of 100 meters, where all 5 Western Balkan countries are looking at this as a sprint, but Kosovo has it as a sprint with hurdles. But we are supposed to reach the target at the same time. So you have to understand how complicated this is for us, but we still believe that if we are given the same chance and the standardized evaluation, we might surprise some of you. Thank you very much.
Sergeant, the final question for you for the second round for the reform and growth plan. Many in our think tank community consider this plan underwhelming. If there is a momentum and if the EU is serious, is this the best tool that could be found to push the region forward? What's your perception of this? I mean, is this a tool that could help the region at this very moment progress in the EU accession path? And actually, also, is the region itself ready for even more coming from the EU? Bigger tools, more resources?
Thank you very much, Yanis. I mean, the Western Balkan countries, especially representatives of the governments here, are not in a position to say that reform and growth plan is underwhelming. Everything that comes in addition to already existing resources to support our economies and development is obviously very much welcome. But I will give you an example. While in the current multi-annual financial framework, Croatian citizens per capita will receive 5,500 euros per capita. This is 5,500 euros per capita. In Serbia, they will receive 10 times less, 500. In Kosovo, less. In all the other countries, less. So if we are designing the instrument that should somehow close these socioeconomic gap between the Western Balkan countries and make the Western Balkan countries more vibrant in economical sense in order to catch up with the European economies. Yes, it is underwhelming, to put it mildly, and yes, you are completely right. There is a big question mark whether the administrations in the region are capable and prepared for receiving more money. As a consultant, I'm working in a couple of countries of the Western Balkan region, and I can tell you that in majority of them, the administration, especially local administration, is not ready to absorb the money coming from the EU. So this is one of the neuralgic spots where the governments should focus, raising the capacities of the local self-governments and the administration in general in order to become ready for absorption of the EU money. And to conclude, just to say, referring back to 20 years ago in Thessaloniki that Peter mentioned in his opening remarks, I was, as a junior, involved in preparation of the common paper of the Western Balkan countries for that meeting. I'm afraid that we regressed from that time. It is very rare that in these days we have a common papers. And in order to speed up the EU integration process, we need to do exactly that. We need to show that we are capable of acting as a future EU member states. And I'm quite sure that one day the countries that we are speaking about, to go together with Moldova, I would say, together with Greece, together maybe with Bulgaria, Romania, will be a southeast flank of the EU. And they need to start behaving like that. Addressing an elephant in the room, Serbian and Kosovo government needs to recognize that. And they need to recognize that the EU integration process is a perfect environment for making Kosovo and Serbian citizens equal. If we adopt the same EU acquis on different aspects, ranging from the minority rights to the economic issues, state aid, whatever, then our citizens will be equal, and accession of both to the EU will be a healing effect for the communities living in that region. And we would prove in a sense that the founding values upon which the EU was founded, Mr. Stutzin was mentioning that the EU is a peace process. We would prove that these values, which are this time taken for granted, are still delivering the results. And I'm strongly advocating for this. Maybe I'm a bit blasphemous by being ideological, living in the geopolitical era, but if you're not having the idea of the future, the vision of the better Balkans, not Western Balkans, but better Balkans, I'm afraid that we are going to remain stuck in our internal quarrels, and this is a very bad message to our EU colleagues. Apart from the reform and growth plan, the EU is slowly but surely opening the forums for participation of the Western Balkan ministers in different council settings. We need to use that opportunity. We need to present ourselves as the future members, as ones who are contributing to resolution of the European problems, rather than becoming, or rather behaving as a problem in itself. These are the messages that we are expecting from the government in the region. So more cooperation, more regional integration, and more solidarity. Just a year ago, when we met here in Athens, and I promise I will finish with that, I was speaking about 2.5 scenarios for the EU enlargement. First being that Ukraine, as the biggest country, takes over the leadership and behaves like a locomotive behind which the whole enlargement happens. The second scenario, where the Western Balkan countries plus Moldova are going first in order to show that enlargement is important and that Ukraine will follow, being aware of the specificities of the big country, big economy, and all the consequences for the European institutional and the financial system. And I offered the half scenario, which says maybe not all of the Western Balkan countries should join at the same time, but rather those who are most successful. And in that group, I would put Montenegro, which is obviously the front runner at this stage. And there is another element of solidarity in the region. We should, as a region, advocate for Montenegro to become the next EU member state in order to show that this is possible in the West Balkans. But together with Montenegro, I see North Macedonia and Albania together in this group. They can catch up if they manage to denationalize their EU accession process. I mean, this is another elephant in the room. Not all the member states are, so open to say yes at the Council. So while I completely agree with Ms. Papadopoulou when she says that there is a genuine interest on behalf of the EU, I don't think that there is a genuine consensus when it comes to the decision in the Council. And the first test is going to be next week, when Bosnia and Herzegovina is on the table, and I hope that next week we are going to get a bunch of positive news from the Brussels for the region. So the geography is not contested. Geography is obvious, but geography does not vote in the Council and does not vote on the national referendums for the accession of a new member state. This is why I'm referring to the common plan, where the member states need to address the issue of the lack of appetite of their own citizens for the enlargement. People in Copenhagen, in Den Haag, in Madrid, they need to speak why the Western Balkans are strategically important for the future, for the common future, as we agreed to call it, of the Europe. Only when we address this, then we will have perhaps an equal playing field where enlargement can work. And I'll stop here.
Thank you, Sertan. You give me mentioning Bosnia and Herzegovina. My information is that there is already some disagreement within the Council about giving the green light. But you give me the opportunity to mention that we were supposed to have also representatives, officials, from both Bosnia and Herzegovina and North Macedonia, but unfortunately, due to some unforeseen difficulties, they had to cancel last minute. I would very much like to thank, first of all, our host, Ambassador Papadopoulou and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Greece, our Slovenian partners, the Bled Strategic Forum and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia. Ambassador, thank you very much for all the cooperation. And as ELIAMEP, and I think our director mentioned it earlier, we will continue bringing the questions of EU enlargement to the public debate of Greece. We will be doing more, including Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine, for sure. And I think it's Greece has, but not only Greece, all the Western Balkans, all the Southeast Europe, but also the EU as a whole, is to gain a lot from this process. And I think we need to keep it back. We need to keep it on the agenda. We need to put it back at the forefront of policy making in the EU. Thank you very much, and there will be more coming from us. Thank you.